This forum today is an initiative of the Policy Advocacy and Economic Transformation Committee of the Institute. And this Policy Advocacy Committee was formed as a result of the vision of our current President, Harsha Cabral, who felt the need for the Institute to play a proactive role in shaping the future of our nation with advocacy initiatives to the policymakers and other stakeholders on matters within the domain of the accounting profession. The Policy Advocacy Committee has recognized 3 advocacy initiatives to embark this year. The first being anti-corruption, the second being public financial management, and the third being tax reforms. These we consider has been the bugbear of our country's progress, and this was prioritized by the committee to actively pursue to make an impact on the progress of this country. In this context, this forum on anti-corruption is held with a view to try and shed light on the subject and create more awareness, and to, of course, solicit the support of the private sector to travel the journey of making this country rid of corruption. We see this has been a theme and a topic in the current political platforms, and we felt that if initiatives of this nature is not embarked on, these may also end up as rhetoric only, and if not perceived actively, for the country to commence a journey to minimize corruption, even if it's not eliminated completely, we felt that this is very important to be pursued with institutes of this nature, so that we really start the journey of getting there, what we envisage the country to be. As we have seen, even if legislation is brought, they are not enforced, and they are not enforced effectively, and they do not yield the desired state and outcomes we wish to have and with the legislators wish to have. So today's seminar is to discuss, and also before that, as you will realize, as you know, there is a need for 2 hands to clap, and we believe the private sector is a strong catalyst in this equation of corruption, and the inducement generally comes from the private sector. So today's seminar is to discuss as to how the private sector can be a strong catalyst in anti-corruption and not to be a catalyst in corruption. And we also want to discuss the role of directors in this regard. So the way forward for us as a Policy Advocacy Committee and as an Institute of Chartered Accountants Sri Lanka is that we will want to have forums of this nature in all 3 themes that I enunciated earlier. And we will follow up this particular session with a roundtable with institutes and agencies that involved in advocacy and professional institutes like ours, and try and bring about and crystallize a strong voice on this front. And immediately thereafter, our vision is that the new president who takes office in the very near future, we intend to present to him our recommendation and roadmap in relation to anti-corruption. Of course, we will also include the other 2 themes as we progress those at the Institute and in pursuing those activities with other advocacy organizations. And we also will want to try and link that to the manifestos that we have seen. All manifestos are carrying anti-corruption slogans to anti-corruption initiatives, and we believe that should form a part of the report card to monitor the progress on this space of the new government. So that's the vision we have, and that's the journey we want to travel within the next few months and the years to come. And as I said, the current president has this vision, and we believe Institute must play a proactive role in this space, and not only in this space, in the themes that we spoke about, and that we will be actively pursuing. So I'm looking forward to the cooperation of our own members as well as the public to support in this endeavor, to really make an impact and influence on the country's journey. So with those opening remarks, I will like to request you all to actively participate in today's proceeding, because we want your feedback, we want your thoughts on this. All this will be captured in the policy document that we wish to formulate and to present to the new government. So with those opening remarks, I will wish all of you a very productive evening attending this forum. Thank you very much.
President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, Mr. Arjuna Herath, Chairman of this committee, the distinguished panelists who are here, and Kasturi, who is joining online, senior members of your profession, accounting profession, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Arjuna and the team, for inviting me, and I believe we discussed this in detail at your committee level, but I think you thought it is best to discuss at a bigger forum, which has been requesting certain nuances on this particular new act. Now, let me start from the responsibilities of directors per se. You know, when we drafted the Companies Act in 2007, it's no more a new act, it's been there from 2007. A lot of new features were brought in, especially with regard to the role of directors. The regulatory element, the controlling element, and especially the duties that are cast on the... So in the Companies Act itself, you find a whole lot of responsibilities and duties cast on the board of directors. Simple mechanisms like the director should act in good faith, in the best interest of the company. The directors should follow the provisions of the Companies Act and the Articles of Association. The directors should not act in a reckless manner. The standard of care that is expected when you are on the board. Now it's cast iron in the Act. And then you have so many sections from 191 to 200 in the Companies Act, which has 534 sections, dealing with conflict areas. What are the conflict issues the directors may come across, especially conflict in contracts and conflicts in share transactions. So, the guideline is basically there in the Companies Act for all directors, whether listed or otherwise, that doesn't matter. Across the board, all directors, executive directors, non-executive directors, alternate directors, independent directors, all types of directors are covered, and there is no way they can say, well, I am not responsible. Because the directors are privy to more information than the shareholders. Shareholders only get information at the annual general meeting or in the quarterly accounts, half-yearly accounts. So they don't know what's going on in a company. It is the directors that know what is going on in the company. So it is important to tell the directors, well, these are your responsibilities. Because the most important thing is, to be a director, you don't need any qualification. All the ladies and gentlemen who are here are professionals. But any non-professional can become a director. That's why I say, like politics, you can become a minister, you can become an MP, you can become prime minister, president, speaker, without any qualification. So, you don't need any qualification to become a managing director, CEO, chairperson. But to be a Auditor, you need a qualification. That's specified very clearly. So you know the auditor's role. Yesterday there was a seminar, about 350 internal auditors were there to address the auditor's responsibilities. Then company secretary has to be a qualified person. So you can imagine the responsibilities those two people have vis-a-vis the corporate world with regard to the company they are in. So in addition to those responsibilities, you have if the company is listed, you have the securities regime that comes in. When you talk about the securities regime, you have the SEC Act, you have the CSC rules, CDS rules. So the threshold is higher when the company is listed. Then not only that, we have other regulators. We have the banking. If you are in a banking sector, you know banking regulations are there. Bank supervision, non-bank supervision. The serious bankers are here. They know it's very, very heavy. So central bank controls that. There is a very, very strict regulatory element from the banking sector. Then you have the insurance regulator. There again, a lot of regulation is caught up. So when you take all that, when you're on a board, there's a whole lot of responsibilities that are cast and that are on you. You're supposed to know. I know in the Directors Institute and your Chartered Institute itself, you've been educating the directors who may or may not know most of them. Now, in addition to that, in August 2023, this new thing came in, Anti-Corruption Act 9 of 2023. Now, we have had bribery, all the other ordinances, all that up to that point we had, but always corruption and bribery was concentrated mainly on the public sector. But public sector to take, someone must give. So the givers were not only from the public sector, most of the givers were from the private sector. So up to now, we didn't have that problem. So we know it's a common secret that you can't get things done in the public sector, like openly you would say organizations like the Indian Revenue, anything to do with the port, or say the police department, or the RMV, or the CMC, provincial councils. You know, the normal route won't work. You should do something more to get your job done. It's a common secret. We all know that. And the private sector also, they somehow get it done. And once upon a time, the people who get it done were known as the capable people who can do business. There are certain cases, well, if you don't, say, maybe public tenders and so on and so forth, if you don't pay something, you have to forget about the tender. In certain, the companies we are in, there was one particular chairperson who used to say, no way. We won't pay any bribe. Let's forget about the tender. And so much so that you lose a lot of tenders on that. So public sector has been full of corruption, and we know all that. All these years we have been going through that. But consecutive governments didn't ignore it. So this particular piece of legislation, 9 of 2023, is a very innovative piece of legislation, I must say. I am sure the people who passed it in the legislature didn't know what was in it. Had they known, they would not have permitted this to come out. Right? And the most important thing is, today we have the Commissioner himself, my friend Chethiya Goonesekera, who is also in our panel, right, who will give you a detailed submission on what this corruption commission is all about and how it works. He has a couple of slides also. So you can get it from the horse's mouth, how it works. Now, the issue is, for the first time, this act brings in the private sector. That's the beauty of it. All this time it was the public, always they talked about the public sector, the bribery and corruption. So the private sector was always okay. They used to give something and get away. They used to get business. This is happening right throughout. Now, if you just another common secret, that all the big companies would have paid the top 4 candidates. Maybe 1 or 2 would have got more. Right? So, now, do you think they pay from their own pocket? From corporate funds. How do they show them? Now, you are the auditors. Have you caught a single person? For now, 76 years this has been happening. Not just today, we are around the corner for an election. Right? They have been funding. Big time funding, not just small funds. Big time funding. But they would have parked it somewhere and the auditors didn't catch it. It may be very, very difficult to catch it either. It won't be easy. And they won't tell that this money was used for, they gave it to X, Y, or Z. Maybe after the May Day rallies, they would, think we'll give more to this one and less to this one. So those are decisions, tactical decisions. But anyway, they do it. That's an open secret. Otherwise, the candidates won't have money. I mean, you can see, they are very poor. You feel like helping them, right? Their income is 200,000, 300,000, very, very poor people. I mean, we feel sorry. We must give something, not the corporates, individually. So that has been the practice, and everybody is, it's a norm. Everybody knows that this is happening. Now, this act comes in and pinpoints certain areas, and it impacts on the private sector. Now, how does that happen? Section 106 of this Act. Now, this Act came into operation from August 2023. Right? Now, by the end of this year, it will be fully operational. Rules and regulations will be in place. Whole lot of things that are going to happen. 106 of this Act. I say for the private sector, these are the most important sections that one has to keep in mind. 106 of the Act says, I will just read 106 for everybody's benefit. Bribery in the private sector. 106.1. Any person who in the course of any economic, financial or commercial activity offers directly or indirectly a gratification on behalf of himself or another person to any employee in any capacity or a director in a private sector entity in order to commit any act or refrain from committing any act in breach of his duties, commits an offence of bribery under this Act, and on conviction be liable to a fine not exceeding 1 million rupees or to a term of rigorous imprisonment not exceeding 7 years or to both such fine and imprisonment. 106.2. An employee, now that is with regard to offer, directly or indirectly a gratification. 2. An employee in any capacity or a director in a private sector entity in the course of economic, financial or commercial activities solicits or accepts directly or indirectly an advantage for himself or for another person in order to act or refrain from doing any act in breach of the duties of such employee or director, commits an offence of bribery under the Act, and on conviction be liable to a fine not exceeding 1 million rupees or to a term of rigorous imprisonment not exceeding 7 years or to both such fine and imprisonment. I believe a powerful minister just came out after 6 months. Right? Case is not over yet. Now, those are very rare examples. There are very powerful ministers go in. So, this brings in the private sector in big way, which was not hitherto not seen in any part. Then 116, another important section, that straight away says, offences by body of persons. Where a body of persons is convicted of an offence under this Act, then A, if such a body of persons is a body incorporate or unincorporate or a corporation, every director, officer, agent thereof. And B, if such body of person is a firm, every partner shall be liable to a fine as specified for the respective offences. Now this catches all the companies. Right? So when you say director, every director, officer, senior, we always talk about directors and officers and so on and so forth, even in the Companies Act. So, a person responsible will be caught up. Now, in addition to that, in section 162, which gives definitions, there is a very important definition which is given to private sector entity. Private sector entity means a specified business enterprise as defined in section 5 of the Sri Lanka Accounting and Auditing Standards Act number 15 of 1995. Right? Now then you go to the Accounting and Auditing Standards Act. So in section 5, it says, the standards adopted by the Institute under sections 2 and 3 of this Act shall be applicable to all business enterprises specified in the schedule to this Act, hereinafter referred to as the specified business enterprises. Then you go to the schedule. Now, schedule is very long. Section 5 schedule. For the benefit of everyone, I am going to read that. Companies listed under the Banking Act number 30 of 1988. Companies authorized under the control of Insurance Act number 25 of 1962 to carry on insurance business. Companies carrying on leasing business. Factoring companies. Companies registered under the Finance Companies Act number 78 of 1988. Companies licensed under the Securities and Exchange Commission Act number 36 of 1987 to operate a unit trust. Fund management companies. Companies licensed under the Securities and Exchange Commission Act number 36 of 1987 to carry on business as a stockbroker or stock dealers. Companies listed under the Securities and Exchange Commission Act number 36 of 1987 to operate a stock exchange. Companies listed in a stock exchange licensed under the Securities and Exchange Commission Act number 36 of 1987. All listed companies caught up. Companies not listed in the stock exchange licensed under the Securities Exchange Commission Act number 36 of 1987. Now, that gives A, B, C, D. A, which have turnover in excess of the prescribed limit. Now, the prescribed limits come in a separate gazette. Right? Now, that is Gazette Extraordinary 1074/7 of 7th April 1999. That gives a clear detail. Now, A, B, C, D, because of everyone has the prescribed limit, so I am read the gazette itself, where the numbers are given. A, which has a turnover in excess of 500 million rupees per annum. B, which had at the end of the previous financial year shareholder equity in excess of 100 million rupees. C, which had at the end of the previous financial year gross assets in excess of 300 million rupees. D, which had at the end of the previous financial year liabilities to banks and other financial institutions in excess of 100 million rupees. E, which has a staff in excess of 1,000 persons. So you will see how this is caught up. You have all the listed company. If it's not listed, so most of the big companies get caught up with this. So now the entity you are talking about is that. And then in addition to that, the Act further says there are further definitions which are important to the private sector, especially who is a whistleblower, who can be a witness, sexual favors, victim, who is a public official. Now that's another area you got to think very, very, very nicely. This public official thing has come in. It has been, public official concept has been getting wider. Right? Under the Audit Act, you bring the 50%. Now this has come down even further. Right? Now, in this, the private sector has been caught up in a situation where, regarding the application of the part, section 80, which deals with application of the part, specifically says under 80 Roman X, chairman, directors and staff officers of companies registered under the provisions of the Companies Act number 7 of 2007, in which not less than 25% of shares are held by the state or public corporation. Now, if you are in an organization where the state owns 25% shares. Yeah, maybe some banks or some certain other organizations, because government, still it has been not tested, Chethiya, whether it's direct holding or indirect holding. Whether if EPF and ETF holds, whether that also amounts to, right, that has to be tested in a court of law. So if the government holding is 25% in that organization you're in, you're also treated as a person who is affected by this. So now you see how the private sector has been caught up, and only very few in the private sector will escape. Maybe the smaller companies. Now, Chapter 1 under Part 3 deals with the offences relating to bribery and corruption. I must say it's very wide. Right? Whole lot of persons will be caught up, and that is a matter you will have to personally think of very carefully when you're on boards, when and how and when you have to avoid such situations. Gratification is in 110, very, very detailed. Any person solicits a gratification, a person accepts a gratification, any person who offers, solicits or accepts gratification, which is an offence under this Act. Right. And then corruption is also sent in 111. So, whatever assistance may be among private companies also, one private company with another company to get a, so if you want to, solicit business in an underhand manner, you pay something to get that. That will amount to bribery and corruption. Private sector with the public sector, that will amount to bribery and corruption. Now, another important feature in this is, those people who are involved in this will be caught in the declaration of assets. We didn't have to do it in the private sector earlier. Now we have to declare. In the public sector, of course, we have to do that. In the public, I was never in the public sector. I got involved in a public sector bank, so I'm also now giving it all. First time in my life, I had to give my declaration. One of your senior members in your profession was asking whether it is safe. He was wondering whether to give up that public office to avoid giving because he said security. You're giving it to, we know that banks, it will be in the central bank. Then we checked with Chethiya. Chethiya said, no, it will be under lock and key. So now we have to give all right? So they give all the asset declaration, true or false, it will be there. A lot of people want to give a very good asset declaration so that whatever you acquire in between also will be covered up. Unless you come and say, okay, I have a fleet of cars, but then I got them as wedding gifts. You see, the asset declaration you have seen in some candidates who have given some crazy stories, how they acquired the assets. But the monthly income is only 300,000, 280,000 or something. So, he says that will be kept under lock and key. But whether it will be in the public domain or otherwise, now even if a RTI application is made, you won't give it. Those are tested. Right? Some crazy guy would want to make an RTI application, right to information application. Your wife's jewelry, right? Your expensive watches, right? Because most of them won't insure and keep it, right? So you're giving all the information out. So until we got this particular act, private sector was saved from all of this. I know the public sector, they have been giving this willy-nilly, whether right or wrong, I don't know whether they have been giving all this. But now the private sector also, if you are in such an organization, it's a 25% declaration of assets have to be in this thing. That is where the private sector comes in. So now the private sector has to be very, very careful. Now, as a matter of fact, under the new listing rules, revised listing rules, now that supports the earlier matter I mentioned, the revised code of best practice and the CSC listing rules, you have to put out 12 policy papers. 12 policy papers. One is on anti-corruption. So you must have a policy paper. Most of the companies have it because from the 1st of October, it has to be on your web page, not the full thing, but at least the summary. Some people have done the policy papers are ready. Most of the big listed companies, they are ready. And it will be on your web page. So the companies have to now, they must work out a formula how best they can protect themselves from this. One is, okay, you must have a policy, I think 9.2.1 of the listing rules, it's compulsory. No excuse, you must have it. Then you must have a policy which says, well, zero tolerance on corruption. A couple of big companies have already started it. Zero tolerance on corruption. And you must also keep in mind to keep a tab on the directors. You know, mostly big companies. Because the thing is, that director who chairman or director or managing director who is involved directly in that transaction will be caught up. Because now there are whistleblowers, you can make an application, they will look at it, there is whistleblower protection under the Act. Right? Then their powers are very wide, they can go to the magistrate court, they can even arrest. Cognizable offences, they can even arrest. And then if you want to file a writ application against them, normally the writs we go to the Court of Appeal. Now you have to go to the Supreme Court. Under this particular Act, you have to go to the Supreme Court. So it's not easy to get a writ from the Supreme Court from 3 judges. So the Act strengthens the powers the Commission has. So it has to be tested whether they will use it. Giving the teeth is one thing, whether they will bite is another. Right? So that will wait and see whether it will happen. Or selective biting is also another. Right? So that is something they will have to consider because they have all the power under the sun now. Freezing bank accounts. Right? Whole lot of powers. I mean, you have never seen those. They can get all very wide powers given in this Act to them. They can go to the magistrate court, they can go for high court indictments, they can go, if you are challenging them, you got to go to the Supreme Court because the writ is also in the Supreme Court. It's very difficult to get a writ or a stay order on a platter. I mean, once upon a time we used to get that in the Court of Appeal, but now it's very difficult because you are getting it from 3 judges. Court of Appeal only 2 judges. Right? And there is no appeal beyond that. If you fail in the Court of Appeal, you can go to the Supreme Court. But now, that power is also given. So they have sweeping powers given to themselves to look out. Now, then you must have in your own organization a gift policy. Right? What is the thing that you can accept and what are the things you can give? Because our old bribery act says you can accept anything below 5,000. Now you can't send even flowers for 5,000. Right? So that regulation has still not come, but you are coming with the figure. Whether it's 15 or 25 or whatever. Gift policy. Now in all advance now they have looked at Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong and they come up with this. Now they will decide what that figure is. But in developed jurisdiction like in Australia, most of the government institutions and even the private institutions, they have their own gift policy. You can accept up to $15. Say if you are going out with your contractor for coffee, they don't ask the contractor to pay, you have to pay your part. Because that can amount to corruption. So gift policy will say, okay, if it's everything more than $15, there is a gift register. You can accept that, write it down in the register and give it to the company. You don't take it to yourself. Or else you refuse to accept. There was in the state of Victoria, there was a prime minister who had to resign after accepting a bottle of Grange, one of those Penfolds, one of the top end ones, 1,500 rupee, a bottle of Grange. And he was caught and he had to resign from the premiership. So those things will happen in the future. We don't know if it has not happened thus far, but who knows, right? We don't know what will happen after the 21st, right? So, but this act is a very solid piece of legislation. So, they will have to internally, because being on boards, sometimes when you're discussing something, very loosely, the top chairperson or the member can say, oh, that particular, no, don't worry, I'm meeting the minister tomorrow. I'll get it sorted out. Now, if that is minuted, right, you've got to be very careful what you minute. Because they have the right to go through all the minutes. Now, SCC, they come and go through all your, even your committee minutes, your audit committee minutes and all that, they can go through. They go through those. So, now you have your recording also. Right? Very soon they will ask for the recording. So, you can't say, I didn't say, if it's in the recording and if it's not in the minute, that's another matter. Right? So, that particular statement is a statement for all the board of directors who were there at that meeting. The defense is, well, I was not aware of it. If you were aware of it, then only the chairman will go to jail. If you are aware of it, well, you will have to hold hands and go with the whole board of directors to jail. Right? So that is something you have to be very careful. The loose talk. When we were, these companies we have been advising, sometimes we tell them, look here, be very careful when you take these people out for dinner. Sometimes you go to hotels, you see, top people with top ministers. These politicians never pay their bills. They get someone to pay their bill. Right? That's a common thing. Otherwise, with that poor income, 280,000 income, how can you afford to go to a 5-star hotel for dinner? Right? So they get someone. So if someone takes a photograph of the director of your company with this particular minister having dinner, and you get a waiter working there to take a photograph of the bill, you have paid with your credit card, that is enough to go to jail. If at that time that company is getting a ports authority, right? You have a tender with ports authority. You have gone either with the chairman or anyone in the ports authority or the minister. You are having dinner. That is enough to end up in jail. It has not happened, but this act gives you teeth to do that. Whether they will do it or not is another issue, but they can do it. So boards of directors, the directors on any board should be very, very careful in whatever you do when you're on the board. In foreign companies, most of the foreign companies, we have some foreign directors on boards, even in certain local companies. If you talk about that, they get up and go. I am not a party to that. They don't want to be a party to that because they have their compliance issues. Very strong compliance issues. So they don't want to be a party to that. Because here every deal, every transaction is, you have something underhand. You can't, in Sri Lanka, basically you can't do business without that. So, but if they are doing that, maybe they can invite that man home and give a dinner or something in a different way where he won't get caught. It will be difficult to catch. But now with the CCTV and the phones, and anyone can take a photograph, right? Even the minister's car coming into your house, when you have applied for a tender and the pending tender, you are one of the companies, that itself is enough. So now they have the entire mechanism ready now. They can check your bank account, they can check the declaration of assets. They have enough power, and time is up for them to start using it. So that is why I said that this piece of legislation, I don't think the legislators knew what was in it. Right? You have very qualified legislature. So I'm sure they didn't know most of it, but it's working well in countries like Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong. Whether we will reach it or not is a big question mark. When will it happen, and so on and so forth. But the private sector should be ready. You've got to be very careful what you discuss at the board level. Because otherwise you also, innocent man also get caught. You can't say, I didn't know, but that at the board meeting they have discussed this. What were you doing? You have a zero tolerance policy paper and you do this. Lovely policy papers. I can show you a couple. I have policy papers of certain listed companies. Anti-corruption, zero tolerance. So their business will go down, definitely, for the time being. So if no one is giving, then it will work. So there will be ways and means. It's a dream. I mean, whether it will work or not, we don't know. But I believe it's a good start. Right? You asking, Anoji was asking whether the public sector has any. Well, public sector always had. The establishment code is there, all that is there. Dr. Roshan knows, all those are there. But they were not practiced. Right? No one follows it. Only the small man who gives a small bribe to a principal, 10,000 rupees, that man is caught. Now, they are prepared to even give the money. If you want to catch trap orders, if you want to make a trap order, okay, I want to get something done, that fellow is asking for 2 million, they will even provide the money so that you can go and give and they'll catch. But if you do that in the, say, import-export business, thereafter you will find it very difficult to survive. The Indian revenue, well, there will be so many QQs that will come after that. And so that is something of challenge. So we have the material, we have the infrastructure, all that is there. They have given a lot of powers to the new commission. Your neighbor commission office is just here. They're joining. Right? So we will hear all the nitty-gritties of the powers and how it works from Chethiya. And so I want to give a private sector perspective. How the director should be careful. Especially the loose talk on boards. What you minute and how you conduct yourself. Forget about the public sector. Public sector always had it. So it will be nothing new to the public sector. But the private sector will have to be very careful and cautious about this. So there are these at least about 4 sections from this act. Right? Because the issue I see is, it has only 164 sections, but there are 268 times the offense is mentioned. 268 in your act, offenses. So that shows there are enough and more offenses, they can catch you. So unless you know them, at least those 2-3 sections I was referring to, you don't have to refer to all the 168 sections, but at least the 2-3-4 sections, I mean, that is what I believe most of the private sector wants. They want a small thing to know what are the things you should do and not do. So that should be captured in your policy paper. The companies should make sure that you have a very good policy paper, even they can even quote that. These are the things, these are the offenses. So when you are on a board, be careful that you are above board and, well, if you are clean, reputation matters a lot. They always say, my father was a schoolmaster. So he used to always say, to build a reputation, it takes 30-40 years. 5 minutes is enough to lose it. So keep that in mind, especially in the private sector or even in the public sector, so that you can retire and go for your morning walk peacefully. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think my task is very easy because Dr. Harsha Cabral explained to you the role of a director in the private sector. I have prepared some slides. 2 slides already Dr. Harsha Cabral explained to you. The other one is section 117. Section 117, it says, employee shall include former employees. Now, sometimes you might think, okay, I am not a director anymore. This happened, or I have retired as a director of that particular company and it does not affect me. No, you are caught up in this act. Remember, if something happens when you are a director, although you retire or you go to another company, you will be caught. Then, section 118, contempt. Disrespect in the commission shall be punishable by Supreme Court. an act done or omitted to be done in relation to the commission, whether in the presence of the commission or otherwise, if any person fails to appear before the commission, refuses to be sworn or affirmed, refuses or fails to answer any question being investigated by the commission, refuses or fails to comply with the requirements of a notice or written order of the commission, refuses or fails to produce any document or thing. Because sometimes we find when we ask directors or officers of a particular company to come and give a statement, they say we don't have the documents, we can't come on this day, and they ask for dates. We won't tolerate that. Because as Dr. Harsha Cabral explained to you, we have got the teeth and we are ready to bite. We have already started, but only thing is there are certain administrative difficulties inside the commission, but we will be following you. It's a matter of time. I'm telling you, it's a matter of time. And also I tell you this, don't get caught, because if you are going to retain a lawyer, lawyers' fees are very, very high. Lawyers' fees are very, very high. And by the time, even if you get out of it, you will be a penniless man coming out of the court premises. I'm telling you because I am a lawyer, and my guru, Dr. Harsha Cabral, is also a lawyer, and there may be other lawyers here. I'm telling you, it's expensive. Section 121, resisting or obstructing duties of the commission. Some slides I will not be explaining, but I will be quickly running through them. Then section 122, false statements, information. If you give misleading or false statement to the commission, definitely you will be charged by the commission. Section 127, interferes with a person. In your company, if there is a person who has already given information to the commission, as Dr. Harsha Cabral clearly explained, a whistleblower, if you try to interfere with that person, definitely we'll have to charge you. Because right now, we are getting about 150 petitions per day. 150 petitions per day. Some are, of course, yes, worthy. Some are not worthy, but those that are worthy, we are following it up. We are investigating those, and we are going ahead with the investigations. Whoever the person, we are not stopping, because remember, we have been appointed by the president, and we can't be removed unless it is by the parliament. Then 133, abatement of the commission of an offence. Even if you abet a commission of an offence, you can be charged. Sometimes you may not be there. You may not be there, but if you support the commission of an offence, you will be charged. Even if it is an attempt, it's section 134. Even if it is an attempt made by your company, and if you are also there, definitely we will catch you. Other one is section 135. Conspiracy. You know what is conspiracy? If you get caught, definitely we will again catch you. This is also very important. Dr. Harsha Cabral knows this. Normally, your wife cannot be brought to court to give evidence against you. But here, under section 144, spouse to be competent witness. Your spouse will be competent witness, and definitely we will lead her or his evidence. So that is the power that has been given to us. I think Dr. Harsha Cabral was very correct when he said the people who passed this didn't know what they were passing. It is 100%, it's the truth. Because otherwise they will never agree to section like this. Section 145, legal obligation to give information. You can't say, I don't know. I have forgotten. I don't have any information. You will definitely have to, you are legally bound to give that information. Section 147, statutory obligation not to utter falsehood. You are legally bound not to utter falsehood. You can't come to the commission and start lying. You can't give a false statement. You can't try to save your friend. Section 153, jurisdiction. It says, any citizen of Sri Lanka who commits an offence under this act within or outside Sri Lanka. We know sometimes directors very hurriedly go to Singapore and maybe they just go for 2 days and come back. We know what has happened. So whether you conspire in Singapore or Sri Lanka, we can charge you. Private sector bribery, Dr. Harsha Cabral explained. Then section 98, bribery for procuring withdrawal of tenders. This is also happening in the private sector, because sometimes what you do is you procure a tender and you get somebody to withdraw the tender, that person's tender. 104, trading in influence. 105, bribery of a foreign public official. And then we see Anti-Corruption Act, there are other important sections. Section 53, where we could get restraining orders. We could freeze, if we know that you are involved in it, we freeze your assets. Your bank accounts, your other assets will be frozen by us. We have started and we have done it, and we'll continue to do it. I think Dr. Harsha Cabral mentioned a particular name when he was delivering his lecture. We have done it and we are going to keep on doing it. Joint investigations. We can do joint investigations with companies or other countries, investigative authorities of other countries. Then revealing and sharing information, section 62. Section 63, international cooperation. We can get cooperation from international entities. Bribery for giving assistance or using influence with regard to contracts. Bribery for procuring withdrawal of tenders. Bribery of a foreign public official. Failure to declare conflict of interest. I think this was also explained by Dr. Harsha Cabral. Next is section 108, offences relating to sporting events. Then also 110, gratification, corruption. And also we, the commission, can, under section 115, non-conviction based forfeiture of property. We can do it, and we will do it, and we are going to do it.
So thank you, Chethiya, for that very useful information. But because it's a new process, can I also ask you to say, okay, how does somebody know they are in trouble? Do they get a letter from you? Do they get a call from you? And then what happens?
Yes, if there is an investigation, definitely. First thing is we will be sending you a letter, or one of our investigating officers will get in touch with you and ask you to come to the bribery commission to give a statement. That's how we will start. And sometimes there are two ways. Sometimes we get the accused statement first. Sometimes we record the other statements, collect all the documents, and finally take you in. So, two ways. Either way, we do it. So that's what I said. Try to avoid. We can do it. It's a very simple thing. Don't get involved with bribery or corruption, because we have to build this country up.
So I think the big question is, so why should corporates deal in corrupt practices? Because with all these problems and getting into trouble. So Kasturi, can I get some comments from you? You've been in the corporate sector, and there is allegation that generally private sector also actively engage in corrupt practices, especially when it comes to winning tenders and also to secure business deals. So why do you think the corporate sector has to engage in such practices?
Well, I think everybody, whoever is in the corporate sector, is doing business. Historically, this is my view, is there is a system when you do business, especially in the government, with the government in terms of tender. The system is geared to have bottlenecks through the process, and somebody needs to, it becomes an economic benefit by putting bottlenecks, right? So there are two ways of doing, two segments of, I think, what I've seen is that you either create bottlenecks where the person who has a right to win business is stopped, so that that person is compelled in the way of winning and doing well in business, just to make sure to remove the bottleneck. You have to ease that burden. So that's a commercial. You kind of end up paying somebody, I guess. The other side, which I saw in the last 5 years, was more scary, is that with regulations and changes in regulations and they eventually don't even gear for the best person to do the business. It is geared in a way that anybody who wants to bid for it can bid, and it can be not the best person. It can be damaging for the country. Still, the deal goes through. Now, that is a different set of corruption. So I think that I cannot talk from a corporate sector point of view, is purely because there are companies and companies. The larger companies who are based on values and governance policies, because they have to be compliant, will not engage in that, or if they do, it is endorsed in a certain set of values. There are smaller companies who are more, their policies and practices are based on the owners or founders' values. There it's easier. If the person believes he's not going to do anything corrupt, he will send the tone from the top and he won't do it. But of course, you'll see, all of us know in the last so many years, there are smaller companies who have won big deals. Somebody has been paid, they've been allowed, and it is not in the best interest of the people as well, in terms of, firstly, you pay more. Secondly, you actually don't get the best product or the service. So the companies eventually is layered up with people. We are supposed to give the shareholders return there. And when these bottlenecks happen, and I was in places where I had to just say, we are not doing this deal, we walk away. But I know right down the value chain, the employees, sometimes their targets are not met, and then the noise comes back to me saying, Hemas is not taking part in this, and we lose by it. So on the long term, how sustainable is it for a corporate to hold that stance and say, you can't be doing business this way? I have been even faced with officials who imply that you need to be kind of nice to them with monetary benefits to do the deal. And I look blank at them and I've said, what do you mean? And they tell it in black and white. And I just smile and say, you know what? I'll lose my job before anything. We'd rather not do this deal. And I smile and walk off. But I know 90% of the businesses would end up engaging that. So the principal underlying thing the companies do engage is because they are in existence to do business. Even if they have a policy, if the other side and you enact it, they should be having other ways of managing and getting it, or saying the pockets are deep enough to forego this deal. And what I mean by other ways, previously, long years back, maybe 10 years ago or 9 years in the healthcare, there were systems in place that you can appeal a tender if you feel there was irregularity. And there was a panel which actually had overturned and given it to us. So there was a process. Last 5 years, I mean, there were blatant tenders. We write, we complain, we say we want an impartial hearing or the review, and then they cancel the tender. So, the process itself has broken down. So you can't, while the private sector, I think, has to take a tough call, because other side, we keep saying that the politicians are and the institutions are full of corruption. There's a give and a take. But at the same time, if there is you don't execute, or you don't take people to task and give an example, it's not going to be sustainable, because how long can somebody's company stay without doing business, particularly if they are the best person to win that tender, or it's the right thing for the country. So I'll pause there, but it's a long, big topic. But I think policies are important. The value system and the philosophy is important right from the top. But you need the other side, and you need the legislation, like there has been legislations for some time, but there has never been enforcement. And if there was enforcement, then I think one by one people will start fearing it and not doing anything, doing the business the right way.
So I think that's what Chethiya is promising us. But I think you brought a very valid point, because why companies engage this is because they want the right to engage in business. So most of the time, what is taken away with this corruption is, especially the people who have the right ability does not get the opportunity to engage in business in the right way. And I think being the biggest party that engages in tender in this country, the public sector. So Suresh, I think you have the opportunity to deal a lot with the public sector. What do you think the type of policies and procedures that are needed to be adopted by the public sector to ensure that they make the business environment right for the private sector? Because it's sometimes unfair, like what she said, okay, certain corporates can walk out of tenders, you walk out of one tender, two tender, but you're basically looking at shutting down your business, right? So unless we also make it a conducive environment, companies can't continue engaging in business. So what are your thoughts on the public sector? Because that's the other key party who has to also get the act right for this, in my opinion, for this act to be really effective.
Thank you, Anoji. So I'll start with an example. A few weeks back, I was having a conversation with a very strong regulator, a very capable regulator. And this regulator has the ability to issue licenses for somebody who wants to enter into that particular sector. And so I asked, do you have a set of rules, or have you given specific requirements if somebody wants to enter the sector that they've got to fulfill? And the answer was yes. And I'm making this point because the regulator is an extremely strong regulator and a very capable regulator, and very capable of being able to identify if someone were to meet all the requirements, they would be able to, without a problem, give the necessary go ahead to do that. Nevertheless, what we were told is that even if somebody were to meet all the requirements, it still needs to go to the minister for the minister to sign off. So then I asked the question, what if somebody has met all the requirements? Does the minister have the discretion to say no? And the answer was yes. Okay. So what this tells you is that our system is based on discretion rather than based on rules. Okay. And we need to move from this discretion-based system into a rules-based system, right? So this is one part of the story, and this gets linked up to 2 or 3 other very important issues. which go back to about the 1970s. So I think it was the 1972 Republican Constitution which brought in a particular clause, and I think it is today Article 55(2) of the Constitution or 51(2), it's one of those. But what the clause says is that the ministry secretary shall act under the direction and control of the minister, right? So now you have a situation where on the one hand the minister has discretion, and on the other hand he has immense authority over the administrative function, over the secretary, right? And the minister can basically dictate what the administrative functions the public servants can do. I understand the need of the political system to be able to set the policy, and that is fine. But here you're saying the political system sets the policy and also thereafter gives instructions in terms of how that policy is actually followed, right? So for example, the political system can say Sri Lanka should have 70% renewable energy by 2030. But then from that point onwards, how you implement that should rest with the public sector, the public service, rather than with the political authority. But now, because of this particular clause in the Constitution, the politician has the ability to interfere in how the implementation is also done, right? So you have discretion and now you have authority. Then, in 1977, we say that the corruption really blew out because of the open market economy. But not necessarily very true, because if you take countries like Singapore, they have a market which is even more open than in Sri Lanka. But like we all know, corruption is, I don't know whether it is zero, but at least it's at an extremely low level. So I don't think it's really the open market system. But in 1977, there was one very, very important thing that happened. We moved away from the first past the post system to a PR system, the proportional representation system, right? And practically what happened is when you were in politics, now suddenly from having to compete within a very small area, which is the electorate, two things happen. So you suddenly then had to compete in a district, a much wider geographic area. And one other important thing happened. You started competing not just with the opposition, but also with your own colleagues, right? So what this meant was the amount of money that you had to spend in your campaign went probably 10 times, right? Because of the geography, as well as because now you were competing with your own team as much as you were competing with the opposition. So now you had the motivation, right? Because you spend a lot of money on your campaign, okay? People may have sold their assets, borrowed money, got contributions, whatever. And now there was motivation to earn the money. So now just think about it, right? Think of the links. You have the motivation, you have the authority, you have the discretion, okay? Now, if we want to prevent corruption, and I think that's where the focus really needs to be, we need to address these three issues, right? We need reforms in all these three areas. Right? And I'm a firm believer that we need to go back to first past the post. We need to change Article 55(2) of the Constitution, where the politician is prevented from directing and controlling the public service, and we need to move away from a discretion-based system into a rules-based system. Unless you do, what Chethiya and what Harsha were describing was a deterrent, and you certainly need the deterrent. But we also need the preventive mechanisms. And I think it is really important to make these reforms if we are serious about preventing corruption going forward. And, we were speaking about the election, and this question, everyone says we will bring corruption down. But you ask them the question, are you willing to change 55(2)? Nobody gives you an answer. If you ask them the question, are you willing to take discretion out of the system? Nobody is willing to give you the answer. So if we are really serious We need to have this very holistic approach. Just as much as we have the deterrence, we also need to close the gaps. And so we have to take this 360-degree approach. Then we will, I think, solve the problem.
So I think that's maybe Arjuna something for you to very strongly come out in the policy paper, because I think like we were discussing, otherwise you'll find fault with all the private sector and they will not have a solution. It's never going to stop. You catch one, you'll have another one taking that person's place. So I don't want to have the audience, as usual, wait till the last minute and not get the opportunity to clear any doubts. Before I ask the next round of question, can I give the opportunity to the audience, if any of you have any questions from the panel, to ask them?
Just a little clarification on some of the items that were discussed. Probably people more in line with the private sector, and probably Kasturi can probably also give some insights. The role of hospitality. If you look internationally, certain areas like the arts, the sports, this is internationally, they are supported by various corporates. You have hospitality desks across the world. Motor racing, golf, cricket, rugby, you have those events. And whether if you're invited to those events, whether you give gifts, whether you invite people, entertain them, and even in Sri Lanka also, sports and arts and all are supported by various corporates. Is that, if corporates invite people, are they covered under is it considered a bribe? I'm not too sure. You mentioned 5,000 rupees, but anyway, it'll be way more than that, or any sort of value like that. The next also, two other questions that I also wanted to ask was the duty to inform about bribery and corruption. Is there an obligation on a third party who happens to overhear something happening? Is he obliged to inform? Can he be prosecuted for not informing?
No, that is the whistleblower approach. If he wants to convey the message, it's up to him. I mean, if he wants to keep quiet, that's a personal thing. But the fact that he knew and not conveyed is another issue.
Yeah, the bribery commission can't go after you for saying that you knew but didn't. A lot of us probably.
We are unable to do that right now, because one thing is we don't have the necessary staff. Right, we will think that in the future, but I don't think that is, we should be, worried about that.
No, just asking. So is there an obligation for us?
No.
Right, okay. No. Then the last thing is, I think the American system.
Unless you are involved in it.
No, not involved, but if you happen to.
So Brian, if I can just add one part of it, if you are auditor, you also have to do certain procedures to check non-compliance with laws and regulations. And in that instance, if you come up with anything, there is a process that you are required to follow. You have to first inform the audit committee, or if, whoever is not involved in it, you have to inform, give them, if I remember, 2 weeks to take corrective action. If it is not, you can even go up to the regulators who is responsible and inform. So that's why I said, when you come to this act, I actually foresee even the professionals can have a role where you can be caught up saying that you haven't really done your job. Because when this standard came, NOCLA, one of the questions the profession had was, what is the leeway we have to guard us against any harm by disclosing it? So but this act will really strengthen that. So
effectively, it's not just the giver or the taker, but even like you're saying, parties connected, like or you said audit firm, NOCLA.
Yeah, so if you are auditing, you come across anything, and if you don't disclose it later on, if it comes to light, you can be found fault with. And if it's something you should have seen.
No, your first part of the question with regard to advertisements and sponsorships, those are permitted. You're not getting anything. That's the companies have to advertise. Now, say if you the sponsorship for the cricket board, the players are wearing the dialogue or moves or whatever. So those are permitted. Now you're not that what you get in return for the cooperation is publicity. You need that. You advertise.
So I was referring to more like you get in like motorsports and all that. You have hospitality tents.
Yeah.
So then you invite people to come, and are those considered? Whether
No, that is not the bribery and corruption. We are. I mean, if you look at all the Formula One races, they are sponsored by all the top business tycoons in the world. That is not the type they are looking at. And even now, even in the US, so the political parties can be take money and they can show it in their accounts. That is perfect. Here we can't do that.
And here the last question was more on the American system of lobbyists. Is that permissible here? I'm not too sure.
What exactly is the question?
So can you employ a firm to do lobbying on your behalf? Like in America, there are firms that lobby issues, certain...
It's not covered in our act, but if it is done in a very transparent manner, say canvassing business and things like that, that is okay. But it's not covered in our act. We have not touched on the lobbying aspect.
Any other questions? Okay.
I think this question is to Anoji. Now, since we agreed the recommendation of Suresh, I think that is the fundamental. Can't we, before the election, submit this proposal to the main three candidates and get their view or the commitment to this? Because otherwise, we will have all these legislations and that and this, it will never materialize.
No, I don't think we have to worry too much because all the manifestos are talking about bribery and corruption.
If you look at all the manifests.
And one candidate has said that he will use AI to stop corruption.
No, this particular, the section what Suresh mentioned, can't we talk about that particularly? Because that would be the outcome of this session.
What Suresh said was very correct because what happens is, well, the secretary of the ministry is a qualified person. The olden days it was a civil servant, now SLAS person. Whereas the minister on top of him, we may not even have O-levels, but he will know how to collect. So that is the discretion he was talking about. I mean, those are things which can come up in the near future. Suppose the new brooms can start on those, if at all. But I mean, we are targeting the perennial problem of bribing. We know that now if you want to put up a house, you go to the CMC with the best possible plan. If you go take the normal route, you won't get it for 1 year. So that's a known fact. Now we all know where we have all these organizations, it's RME or CMC or all these organizations. It's now beyond repair. So unless you start and maybe catch 1 or 2 big players, not the small players, you have to catch good ones. Then only. You have seen, no, even the SEC rules, I always say, I mean, you must catch the big fellows. Then only the message will be conveyed.
Can I just ask?
Yes.
Maybe just one quickly. I think the idea is to, that discretion, I think that was spoken about, and directives being given. I think those are concepts we can clearly enunciate. I think all the candidates have committed for anti-corruption, and I believe any one of them winning will have to travel that journey given the past history that we have had in the recent past history. And I feel advocacy and influence and pressure that will build up may have some impact is our belief. Let's see how it goes. I want to have a quick question if you don't mind. Suresh spoke about the rules. We have seen in the past, I'm getting into a narrow sense of, I think you spoke in a sort of broader sense. We've seen tenders being formulated to favor one party. And we feel after a process, only one party is actually this may be even to you subsequently. My question is, so you have the rules which are being used to, in fact, commit bribery, clearly. We have seen procurement agencies in this country. We have seen tender processors. But it's been used also, it's been abused to actually commit corruption. We have seen that happen.
So my question to you is, if there's a complaint to the Bribery Commission to say a certain tender has got fixed, do you have the ability to investigate and actually dig into it and find, in fact, the process that followed didn't really look reasonable at all? And is that a scenario that can emerge?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Definitely, we will start an investigation, but we have to be informed. The problem, my humble request from all of you is, please inform us. The issue here is only a small person will come and say, Grama Sevaka is asking for 500 rupees. Or the police officer is asking for 1000 rupees. Nobody is coming and complaining to us saying that so and so is asking for 1 million rupees, 2 million rupees. As Dr. Harsha Cabral very clearly said, we are ready to provide you with money. You don't have to worry about a cent. We have the money. If you say, except for Saturday and Sunday, we will give you advice how to avoid Saturday and Sunday. But on a weekday, if you inform us, we will provide you with whatever they are asking. Now, recently you saw we arrested a particular officer or members of a party. They wanted 30 million, we provided 30 million. So you have to inform us. Without informing us, don't blame us. Because our officers are working 24 hours. Our officers are working 24 hours. Inform us, then we will definitely, we give you an assurance we arrest that person. Whoever it is, we will arrest that person. But only thing is, beforehand you have to inform us. Useless informing after the tender is awarded.
Evidence is important.
Yes, evidence is important.
So stay away for so and so.
Yes. The other thing is, I believe, rather than the politicians, it is the fault of the public official. Public officials don't have the backbone to say no. You should be able to say, sorry, I can't do it. If all the secretaries or all the people who are involved in the procurement process says, no, we can't do it, what happens? It will stop. When a train is coming, why don't you try to cross the railway line? When a train is coming or train is approaching, why don't you try to cross the railway line? Because you know that will be the last time you will be crossing the railway line. That should be the case of all the public sector officers.
All the public sector employees and us also, so that everybody reminded of where we stand, because that would make it easier. We can, if somebody asks for a bribe, we can, without doing all these, we can just say we got a letter. You all also would have got a letter. Why don't we just, do it the right way? That will save a lot of money and time.
Actually, the law, you're supposed to know the law, but after, now in one of the organizations I have been, after this act came into operation, I sent a notice to all the employees, and especially to that organization has 7 unions. Right? Very strict this thing to say that, look here, any form of request made for promotions, transfers, or any other benefit, or getting someone else for, say, recruitment. Politicians won't hear this. They keep on sending. Recruit so and so from this party, that party, so on. So after this letter went, I must say, the organization with about 4,300 staff have been fairly careful. I quoted the section from the V-Day Anti-Corruption Act 9 of 2023, this section. So be very careful when you're putting it down in writing, right? Because your name is there. You're asking for a favor from someone else. So I said, make sure that you don't go behind anyone else and get a letter. So get hold of a minister and say, can you kindly transfer this person from that place to what? Or can you give a promotion? He is our union president or something. That letter is enough for him to the man who is asking for the benefit and that other person's name is also there. If I give that letter to, I told them, I called them and said, well, if I give that letter to the commission, you can go behind bars. So your thing is awareness. Well, now, at least now, this act is fairly new. It will be fully operational from next year, actually, once the regulations, rules and regulations come in. So people have to be careful. They have to know what exactly is happening. And, well, I believe they are doing some awareness campaigns also.
I think, just to elaborate on that same thing, I think the request is for the commission to issue a circular to the public sector and publish in the newspapers saying, refrain. And these are, the kinds of sort of give so that they can, when they go to the public sector, they say, this is open, right? It's in open. We can't induce you. Is the kind of thing. He's asking whether you could send a circular.
Awareness, of course, if you make a request to our commission, we are ready to do awareness, come and do awareness free of charge. We don't charge anything. Any place we will come as long as you organize it. You give us a time, except it's better in the evening because then we are free. We do it free of charge for any of one of you. Your companies need any awareness programs, organize it. We will come free of charge. We don't charge anything.
So something the Act also requires you is to appoint a compliance officer and also to check compliance by way of investigations and audits, and also to have regular awareness sessions for your employees. So you can actually do those and maybe call the commission for some of those things, but that is also a requirement that is really falling to the companies to ensure that this the requirements of the Act is properly the knowledge is disseminated and everyone is aware. So I think Dr. Harsha sending the letter is a good start.
That is an example. Another organization debated this last year, just after the Act came into operation, and decided to stop sending Christmas hampers. You see? Send Christmas hampers to ministers. This is happening in your organizations, you all know. Very expensive hampers are sent to ministers. They are paid to do a job. You don't have to send them additional hamper to support you. So that again is, so that particular company stopped it. Right? You can send hampers to your maybe former employees or whoever, if you, in the private sector, if you want to get good relations, nothing expected in return. But why should you send hampers to the ministers or chairpersons of corporations? So now these things you'll have to keep in mind. That's why the gift register and all that will come with the regulations. But internally, just because you're having it in a policy paper won't do unless you really put it into practice.
So Kasturi, I'm going to turn back to you because we have the advantage of you being in a country where it's considered one of the most compliant when it comes to promoting ethical business practices. Do you think you can share some insights with us how Singapore deals with ensuring a proper environment for ethical business, and also if anyone is found fault with, what is the consequence?
Yeah, Anoji. So I think Suresh did allude to this about while, I mean, of course, there'll be small corruption at some level, but majority Singapore is like less in terms of corruption. So that comes from actually they have a stated position that they don't encourage, they don't tolerate corruption. So it's zero corruption is a stated position even at government level. And it's a practice also. And the fact that they make examples of anything which is in a gray, just to make sure people understand that government means business and they don't leave room. So, for example, there was a minister who recently, I think about 4 months ago, was given 2 concert tickets as a gift. And that came out, and that was it. He had to resign, and he he gave up his portfolio. So that's the level of, and it hits the headlines. It's talked about. That's the level of enforcement and practice they adapt at the government level. Now, when you talk about private sector, it was alluded in our legislation, but it's really here. There's a huge obligation on directors, and it is enforced. But it's also backed with proper process of everything. So there is no ambiguity. You want to do any business, there's a process. There is no ambiguity. You get it done, and there's a system. They don't expect favors because it's all stated. There is no shortcuts for anything. It is all stated. It is never have I seen in the last 6 months I've been here a conversation of, well, can you call somebody and get it fast tracked? That doesn't happen because there's a process. You can be A, B, or C. You have equal opportunity and you're treated equally. So I guess having this is one part, having the legislation. But I think the bigger problem we'll have to enforce it, the system has been broken over the last so many years. Successive people have come in, the independence of the institution to run independently in Sri Lanka, for the civil service to take it over, has been taken out. They have got ambiguity in terms of the changes in regulations where ministers, other officials can intervene and take decisions above, like Suresh said. So, I mean, those systems have to be repaired. The processes should be clear so that we and private sector can operate clearly. And then you can enforce this as well, because all those three things also have to be in place. So you have a stated position, you have legislation, you have a practice, and the process should be also there. So for me, it's the total contrast in terms of how we operate. And sadly, I mean, sometimes Sri Lanka loses investment and business because of it. I mean, we were trying to do a project in Sri Lanka, setting up manufacturing for export. At border from custom to every point, it was ambiguity. And they say, go and register for TEEP, this, that. But every point, there's a human being who intervenes and says no. So much so that here the owners are like zero tolerance for, because they come from that background. They said, just take at your cost, our cost, take the equipment right back to Singapore. And then in Malaysia, we are setting up a plant. It was absolute processes were clear. Nothing, it's set up, it's going to be operational, but there was not one issue which you had to bounce back and say, look, how do we do this? Because if there was an issue, there's a process of how to do it. So I get, while we chase corruption, we also have to clear the system so that corruption doesn't have a place to exist.
Exactly. So I think, Suresh, I'm going to move to you because you've been part of the quite a lot of MNC, and you're a chairman of MNC now, which I know has very stringent policies on doing ethical business practices. How challenging do you find adopting and following those policies in Sri Lanka?
No, I don't know. I mean, the question itself.
No, are you able to see, when you are a MNC, they will give you certain set of policies. Yeah. They will expect you to adopt that in your business practices. So have you been able to effectively do that in Sri Lanka, or have you had to lose business not being able to do that? To ask it in a different way.
No, I don't think. Okay, so maybe it's the company concern, the business it is in, the sector it is in, and so on and so forth. So I don't think that has ever arisen, okay. Anoji. Yeah. Clearly, yes, the policies, the regulations that an MNC, and I think almost any MNC will, particularly the big MNCs, and particularly those that are also listed, for example, say on the London Stock Exchange or the New York Stock Exchange, I think they have some very, very strong and very stringent policies in place, and those are, and it's not just written on paper. I think they are followed to the letter, because just think of it from their perspective. Sri Lanka is a very small country, right? And these guys are listed on the London Stock Exchange, New York Stock Exchange. Something in a small economy like Sri Lanka goes wrong, it's going to impact the entire global business. So they will simply not take the chance, right? So I think you got to be conscious of that as well. And they are extremely thorough in terms of what is laid down, in terms of how it gets disseminated across the organization, how it gets updated on a regular basis, how the compliance is tested out, how they are audited, and so on and so forth. So there is an entire process around it. And also the fact that they operate in so many different markets means they have an enormous amount of experience. So they bring that experience to the table. So one of the differences that you see between, say, a MNC and a Sri Lankan company might be the extent of detail that they go into. The Sri Lankan companies don't have the similar experiences, let's say, where these guys have experiences across hundreds of countries in the world. So they bring all those experiences to the table.
Okay. So, Dr. Harsha, I think I'm going to ask, I've got 5 minutes more, but just one interesting question. I think you addressed it somewhat in your presentation. Now, we see sometimes when there are issues in companies, we see certain directors quickly resigning or certain CEOs resigning, employees resigning. And you said if they have been there in this in the company during the tenure, that you could still get scoped in. I think, Chethiya, maybe you can also pitch in. So to do that, you will have to really prove that they were aware of the thing, or just by being a director in the company during this time, you're automatically responsible.
Yeah, if you were aware of it, the question is when you are charged, one defense you can say is I was not aware of it. So if there is evidence to prove that you were there, say if it was discussed at a board level, you have been a member of that board, that is enough. So otherwise, so maybe that's why when you're on the board, you got to be careful. There can be reckless managing director or a reckless chairman who has uttered some words which are really irresponsible. Then you are part of it. You have been there. You were aware of it, that he was going to meet this particular minister or whatever. So that is something you've got to be careful. Otherwise, you get landed. So it's best to be if you think that things are not going the correct way, you can record your objection there. And they say, no, I'm not a party to this, but because of that, I'm resigning. Or you record it that way, well, I don't agree with you, that particular avenue you're taking. So then you will have, if it ends up in a court or any other forum, well, you will have some form of defense. You're not a party to it.
So, okay, I think we need to wrap up. So, I'm going to ask each of you, like I think Arjuna said, we are planning to do this policy paper and also submit it. So, we'd like from each of you something that you would like us to include in this policy paper, where we can also maybe champion further advocacy efforts to get some of the systems right, the policies right, the procedures right, to make this act effective and hopefully deter and curb corruption in the future. So, Kasturi, can I start with you?
I think recommending one thing is getting whether big or small corporates recommending that they take a position and stance, and having a policy is important. We are now, most of the smaller SMEs might not do it, might not have a policy. That is one side of it. But again, practicing that in the context of running business day to day, the challenge of not getting the business was going to be a challenge. So because of that, on the other side, while it will take time, yes, there is legislation and you can have a whistleblower, but there's always 2 or 3 sides to it. I think there's an intermediary step you should recommend, which was there before. You have an intermediary like inquiry board, which is independent. You could get an independent lot of people to look at it and then and figure out whether this first the tender is right or wrong. And then, of course, it goes back to there can be legal action against the people concerned, but a process in place as well, because how many cycles, while you have the policy and you start say that they adopt it, how many cycles can a corporate keep going without doing business? So I'm just trying to say, alternatively, have a process, encourage a process, independent process where you'll have independent people to look at it as well, till the system kicks in.
Thank you. Dr. Harsha?
I would say that all companies y'all are professionals. We are all accountants here. So as an accountant, you have your own ethics, whether there is a statute or not to prevent corruption, bribery. So you have your own ethics. As a professional, you should not be a party to any of this.
So zero tolerance should be the key. You have to, in the company you can say so, for all your members you can say so, that the theme should be zero tolerance, top to bottom.
Thank you.
My humble request from all of you is voice your concern, because we have, if you take Sri Lanka, I think we have more acts, more legislature than any other country, but we are not practicing, because the reason is people are not coming forward. So now the act is there, we need your support. Without your support, we can't do anything. You have to give us evidence, because all depends on the evidence that is placed before court. So please come forward, support us, we will help you, and also we will protect you. Because Act clearly says, if you are going to be a witness, if you are going to be a whistleblower, CIABOC has to protect you. If there is any threat from your directors or the chairman, we are ready to protect you.
Thank you. Suresh.
Yeah. So this whole thing, I mean, there are two important aspects that we need to look at. One is integrity, and then there is the legal situation, right? And I want to draw a distinction between these two, and I'll take an example. You go to a restaurant, you order drinks, food, etc., and you get the bill, okay? And you see that there is, say, something that you ordered is not on the bill. Now, it's perfectly legal, you can pay the bill the way it is, and that's perfectly legal. But integrity is when you tell the steward, look, you haven't billed me for something, right? So I'm really adding on to what Harsha says about the ethics. And I think that is what we need to inculcate in our people. And what we need to also understand is that, kids, when they are born, the DNA makes them, kids are not corrupt, right? And we need to promote that value system going forward so that when they become adults, so the education system, the way we parent our kids, all of that, it's the value system that we need to inculcate within the people. And translating that value system into the corporate world, I want to take a point that Chethiya makes about being able to speak out. He spoke about how the public servants need to speak out. In our organizations, in the corporate world, if we encourage our colleagues within the corporate, to speak out, not just on corruption issues, but even on operational issues, even on strategic issues, when they disagree, put your points on the table, have the debate, have the conversation. Don't be afraid to raise your voice, even if you're talking to the CEO or the chairman or whoever. Put your point on the table. That leads to a much better corporate environment, and it prevents the kind of issues and challenges that we were talking about today. So that openness and the values that we need to inculcate in our people, I think those two are very, very fundamental if we want to address the issue of corruption in the country.
I think build a proper culture, right tone at the top, make your voice heard, and also open communication. So those are four strong things that we need to also promote this ethical corporate culture. So thank you very much. I think it's an absolute pleasure to moderate such a very eminent panel. And thank you, Arjuna and the President, for giving the opportunity, and also to all of you for being here and your active participations. Thank you.